Under the bruised sky of the war-torn planet, a horizon of wreckage and blood stretched endlessly before me. The air stank of ionized ozone and burnt metal, a smell that clung to the back of my throat like a bad joke. Plasma bolts flickered in the distance, painting the darkness with momentary flashes of green and orange, like some kind of cosmic fireworks show that nobody really wanted to see. I'd been patching up soldiers for hours, my med kit a jumble of bandages, synth plasters, and painkillers that worked about as well as duct tape on a starship hull. I wasn't even supposed to be here. Officially, I was stationed at the field hospital 3 clicks south, but the front line had shifted so fast it might as well have come with a warning label. Run now or regret it later. I'd lost track of how many I'd tried to save. Some made it, most didn't. War had a way of chewing through even the toughest bodies, spitting them out with a kind of casual cruelty that made me question why I bothered. That's when I saw her. She was half buried under the twisted wreckage of a downed hover tank, one leg pinned by a sparking metal beam that smelled like burned hair. At first, I thought she was human. She had the same slender build, the same haunted look in her eyes. But when I crouched beside her and brushed the soot from her face, I saw them. Long, delicately tapered ears that curved upward like a cat's, only more graceful. She was an alien, but she looked enough like us to make my chest clench. "Hey there," I muttered as I rummaged for my scanner. "Looks like you picked the worst possible place for a nap." My voice cracked with forced levity, a reflex I'd honed from too many hours watching people bleed. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing an unsettling shade of violet that glowed faintly in the gloom. She coughed, a sound that reminded me of a malfunctioning plasma vent, and tried to speak but only managed a breathless, "Huh? Man?" Her voice carried a lilting accent, almost musical, as though each syllable danced on the edge of a laugh. "Yeah, that's me," I said, trying to untangle her from the wreckage. "Certified human, though some would argue otherwise." My scanner beeped in protest, shrapnel embedded in her leg, plasma burns, and a broken rib or two. "Lucky for you, I'm pretty good at playing doctor." She tried to smile, though it came out more like a grimace. Can you save me?" I snorted, which probably wasn't the most comforting reaction. "Lady, I've been saving grunts and mercs all day, and you'd be amazed how hard it is to keep a guy alive after he's been turned into Swiss cheese by a plasma cannon. Compared to that, you're a walk in the park." She made a small sound, half laugh, half sigh, then fell silent as I worked. My hands moved with mechanical precision. Inject the coagulant, seal the burns with synth skin, wrap the leg with a brace that beeped at me like an annoyed droid. I cracked a joke about how the brace might start singing if she moved too fast, but she didn't react. When I was done, I leaned back on my haunches. "Okay, mystery girl, that's the best I can do. You'll live, though you might not win any dance competitions for a while." She blinked at me, those luminous eyes too bright in the smoke-stained night. "You saved me." I shrugged, trying to mask the way her gratitude felt like a punch to the gut. "Yeah, well, I'm a sucker for pretty faces with pointy ears." For a second, she almost smiled, a fragile expression that didn't belong in a place like this. But before I could ask her name, the ground shook, and a fresh wave of plasma fire lit up the night. "Time to move," I said, and before she could protest, I lifted her carefully into my arms, her armor clanking against my chest like an echo of the chaos all around us. As I carried her through the smoke and wreckage, I couldn't help but mutter, "Remind me to ask for hazard pay after this." And then just like that, she was gone, like a dream I hadn't even realized I'd been having. Years had passed since that night on the battlefield, a lifetime of patches and repairs, of plasma burns and half-healed scars. The war had ended in some places and just started in others, but I'd managed to outrun it long enough to set up a small clinic in the lower levels of New Arcadia. If you've never been, imagine a neon-lit scrapyard welded to the underbelly of a dying star, and you'll get the idea. My sign blinked with all the enthusiasm of a dying droid. Doc's quick fix, humans, aliens, and mostly functional androids. The mostly part was the important bit. Tonight, the clinic smelled like recycled whiskey and antiseptic. Two scents that clashed like rival gangsters in a dark alley. A half-disassembled cleaning bot trundled across the floor, squeaking out a tuneless rendition of Fly Me to the Moon. I'd tried to reprogram its music module once, but I'd ended up with an endless loop of elevator music that made even my patience beg for mercy. I was elbow deep in an exosoldier's shoulder plate when the door chimed, an irritated whine that always sounded like it resented the interruption. I muttered under my breath, "If that's the landlord again, tell him I'm busy performing open-heart surgery on a toaster." But when I turned, she stood there, haloed by the flickering neon sign outside. Her armor gleamed, polished to a shine that made the cracked tile floor look even more pathetic by comparison. And her ears, those impossibly long, delicate ears, peeked out from beneath her helmet, giving her the air of a battle-hardened elf who'd taken a wrong turn on her way to Middle-earth. She stood rigid, her violet eyes bright, as if she'd stepped out of a dream or a particularly persistent hallucination. For a moment, all I could think about was the girl under the wreckage, the way she'd smiled at my terrible jokes. I didn't know whether to laugh or run screaming into the night. "Human," she said, her voice a mixture of steel and something softer. "I never forgot you." I blinked. "Well, that's flattering, considering most people can't remember me after the second drink." A faint smile ghosted across her lips, though it looked like it hadn't been invited. "You saved me," she continued, "back on Vesper 7. "Technically, I patched you up," I said, wiping my hands on a grimy towel. "But sure, let's call it a rescue. Sounds more heroic." She removed her helmet, and I saw the lines on her face, lines that hadn't been there before, etchings of battles fought and choices made. Her ears twitched slightly like antennae picking up on a joke only she could hear. "You don't understand," she said, stepping closer. "I've been looking for you. For years, most people try to avoid me," I said, gesturing at the chaos of my clinic. A rat-shaped cleaning drone skittered by with a squeak of protest, nearly colliding with the half-dismantled exosoldier. "It's part of my charm." She ignored the drone and reached out, her gauntleted hand brushing my cheek. "I wanted to say thank you, but also, I need your help." My stomach twisted like a faulty hyperdrive coil. "Look, lady, I'm just a guy who's good with medkits and bad with personal boundaries. Whatever you're mixed up in, it's bigger than you think," she said, eyes shining. "There are people, my people, who think I'm a traitor. I've seen things that—" She paused, then laughed, a short, humorless sound that reminded me of the way plasma rifles whine when they overheated. "I never thought I'd come back here, but I need you." I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the ridiculous cleaning drone, now chasing its own tail in the corner. "Well, I guess that makes two of us. You need me, and I need to figure out how to get that thing to stop dancing." She laughed, a sound like music and broken glass all at once. And in that moment, with the neon bleeding down the walls like alien rain, I knew this was only the beginning. The hum of the city above us sounded like the distant thrum of an old starship engine on its last legs, a constant reminder that New Arcadia never really slept. It just pretended to for the sake of the desperate souls who wandered its neon alleys. The clinic, with its patchwork of flickering screens and half-functional equipment, felt both too small and too large now that she was here, her presence folding time and space like a glitch in the continuum. She sat across from me on a repurposed medbed, her armor gleaming like a relic from a forgotten empire. The pointed tips of her ears caught the glow of a flickering overhead light, giving her an ethereal quality that made my chest tighten in ways I hadn't felt since that night on Vesper 7. "You know," I said, trying to keep the conversation from slipping into the emotional quicksand between us, "if you're going to keep showing up in full battle regalia, you're going to make the other patients jealous. I had a guy in here last week with a plasma burn so bad his left eyebrow migrated to the other side of his head. All he had to show for it was a discount on his next visit." She laughed softly, and the sound made the place feel warmer, like the heater finally kicked in. "Your sense of humor hasn't changed," she said. "It's comforting." "Yeah, well, I charge extra for the jokes," I said, grinning. "Now let's talk about why you're here." She took a breath that seemed to draw in the whole galaxy, her violet eyes bright and haunted. "After you saved me, I went back to my unit, she began, voice trembling just enough to betray the weight behind her words. They didn't trust me anymore. They thought, they thought I'd been compromised. I frowned. Compromised? Because of me? She shook her head. Not just because of you, because I hesitated. Because I saw a human help an enemy. Because I didn't kill you. She looked up, her gaze cutting through the haze of antiseptic and neon. I've spent years fighting their war, but every time I closed my eyes, I remembered you, the way you treated me like I mattered. That was enough for them to brand me a traitor. I whistled low, scratching my chin. Wow, I've had bad dates before, but that's a new level of awkward. She smirked, though it looked like it hurt. They're hunting me now. I barely escaped with my life. I thought if I could find you, maybe you'd help me find a way to stop them. I leaned back, letting out a sigh that sounded like it belonged in a noir detective hollow. Listen, I'm just a patch-up guy with a half-broken cleaning drone and a reputation for questionable hygiene. But you're the real deal. You've got armor, fancy ears, and that glowy eye thing. What could I possibly do to help you? She smiled then. A real, genuine smile that lit up her face like the stars on the other side of the nebula. Because you saved me once, she said, and because you still see me as more than just an enemy. For a moment, the clinic seemed to fade away, replaced by the battlefield on Vesper 7, the smell of scorched earth and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. All right, I said, leaning forward and trying to ignore the sense of impending doom that came with it. If you're going to drag me into a cosmic mess, at least let me change my socks first. She laughed, a musical sound that seemed to chase away the shadows gathering in the corners of the room. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, I realized I didn't mind being part of her war. Deal, she said, extending her hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip strong enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, we'd stand a chance against whatever was out there. Deal, I echoed. And as I shook her hand, I felt the weight of 1,000 stars pressing down on us. Little did I know that from this moment on, every step we took would lead us deeper into the heart of a conflict that would redefine the boundaries between human and alien, between loyalty and betrayal. And somehow I'd have to find a way to keep my sense of humor intact. The stolen freighter we'd borrowed from a disreputable scrapyard dealer on the outskirts of New Arcadia was the sort of ship that made the word junk look generous. Its hull was a patchwork of old starfighter plating, and the hyperdrive coughed like a chain-smoking droid whenever I tried to push it past sublight speeds. Every time I turned on the nav system, it displayed a cheery message. Error 404, star map not found, accompanied by a dancing holographic cactus that seemed to mock my every move. Sarah, she'd finally let me call her that, claiming it was the closest human approximation of her real name, sat beside me in the cramped cockpit, her armor stripped down to a flight suit that looked a little too snug in the shoulders. Her long ears twitched like alien antennae, tracking every creak and groan of the old freighter as though each sound might spell doom. You sure this thing can make it to the jump point? She asked, her voice laced with just enough humor to soften the edge of her worry. I thumped the control panel, which responded with a suspicious hiss and a small puff of green smoke. Trust me, I said, trying to sound confident. This baby's got at least 3 or 4 jumps left in her, maybe 5 if we keep the jokes coming. She gave me a look that was equal parts exasperated and amused. Your optimism is refreshing. Hey, optimism is cheaper than new parts, I said, flipping a switch that may or may not have been connected to anything useful. Besides, if the hyperdrive fails, we can always get out and push. She chuckled, a sound like stardust dancing on metal. I'm not sure even my ears are aerodynamic enough for that. I liked the way her laughter brightened the cramped space, pushing back the weight of everything that was chasing us, her people branding her a traitor, the bounty hunters lurking in the darker corners of space, and the gnawing question of what we'd do when we ran out of places to hide. I ran a diagnostic on the life support system, which beeped in protest before flashing a message. Oxygen levels nominal-ish. I decided to call that a win. So, I said, leaning back and stretching my arms as best I could in the tight confines of the cockpit. Tell me more about this betrayal thing. Maybe there's a support group. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm a wanted alien warrior princess. She snorted. You think I'm a princess now? I grinned. With those ears? Royalty for sure. Probably a whole planet of ear admirers out there. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the smile tugging at her lips. My people have fought for centuries, even before we encountered humans. They believed survival meant never trusting anyone outside our own kind. Her smile faded, replaced by a faraway look. But when you saved me, you saw me as someone worth saving, not just an enemy. I reached over and gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Well, I never could resist a pretty face with pointy ears. She laughed again, the sound echoing in the old metal hull like a promise. Jump point approaching, the nav system announced in a voice that sounded suspiciously like a used car salesman trying to sell me a black hole. I gave Sarah a lopsided grin. Hold on to those fancy ears. We're about to punch a hole in the fabric of space-time, and I don't want them getting tangled in the jump field. She raised an eyebrow. Is that your technical explanation? It's my highly professional, scientifically accurate explanation, I said. The freighter shuddered as the jump drive engaged, the stars outside smearing into long lines of light like someone had taken a paintbrush to the cosmos. Sarah's hand found mine on the console, her grip firm and warm, and I knew that no matter what awaited us on the other side, we'd face it together. One joke, one jump, one improbable escape at a time. We burst from hyperspace into the black maw of a dying starbase, its once majestic spires now crooked fingers grasping at the void. The place had seen better days, probably around the time dinosaurs were still making cameo appearances on Earth. Hull plating peeled away like old paint, and debris drifted in zero gravity like a garbage ballet. But for all its rot and ruin, it was a place where no one would look for us. Perfect for fugitives with nowhere left to run. Sarah stood beside me in the cramped cockpit, her long ears brushing against the bulkhead every time she turned. The glow of the console reflected in her violet eyes, twin beacons of hope and fear. The tension in her posture had softened since we left New Arcadia, like she'd finally accepted that no amount of armor could shield her from the choice she'd made, to stand by me and by her own conscience, even if it meant defying everything she'd ever known. She glanced at me, a small smile on her lips. You're quiet, she said, and her tone made me grin despite the dread humming in my chest. Just saving my strength for the final boss fight, I said. I figure it's going to be a big one. I hear he's got a killer monologue. She laughed, and in that sound, I found the courage I'd been pretending to have all along. We powered down the ship, stepping into the starbase's cavernous hangar. Echoes of long-abandoned battles rang in the metal bones of the place. Sarah's people had found us, drawn by some relentless tracker hidden in her armor, a last-ditch betrayal that made her jaw clench when I pointed it out. Guess your people are better at tech support than I gave them credit for, I muttered, pulling a loose wire from the scanner. Next time, let's get matching tinfoil hats. She rolled her eyes, but her grin was genuine. Next time, she said, the promise hanging between us like a lifeline. The first plasma bolt seared the air, leaving a trail of ozone and sparks. Sarah spun, blaster at the ready, her movements sharp as ever. I dove behind a crate that looked like it had been used for smuggling contraband or maybe questionable sandwich ingredients. Your friends are a little intense, I shouted, ducking another bolt. They're not my friends anymore, she said, voice tight. And in that moment, she wasn't just a soldier or a fugitive. She was someone choosing her own path, even if it meant shooting at her own kind. We fought side by side, the air a symphony of plasma shrieks and ricocheting metal. At one point, I made a mental note to add dodging plasma fire to my resume, right next to bad at relationships and prone to sarcasm. When the last of her pursuers fell, silence settled like dust. Sarah stood amid the wreckage, breathing hard, her long ears drooping just a little. She turned to me, eyes wide and wet, and I felt something inside me shift, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. You didn't have to do this, she said, voice trembling. Hey, I'm just here for the jokes and the occasional plasma burn, I said, but my grin couldn't hide the ache in my chest. You needed someone who believed in you. Turns out I needed someone like that too. She laughed, a soft, broken sound that carried more relief than any medical kit I'd ever held. She reached for my hand, her grip warm and sure. You saved me, she whispered. You saved me right back, I said. We walked together through the husk of the starbase, our steps echoing in the emptiness. And in that quiet, I realized I'd changed. From a battlefield medic who tried to fix everyone else's wounds but never his own, to someone who'd found a reason to keep fighting, even if it was just to make her laugh. As we boarded the battered freighter, the stars beyond the viewport felt less like cold pinpricks of light and more like signposts to somewhere we both belonged. I fired up the engines. Miraculously, they still worked, and turned to Sarah, the woman with the long ears and the laughter that made me believe in second chances. Where to now, princess? I asked, grinning. She rolled her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Anywhere, she said, and in her voice I heard the promise of a universe yet to be discovered.